For a century and a half, Egypt had no pharaoh worthy of the name. Abram had arrived in the country sometime during the rule of the 9th or 10th dynasty, two families of kings who probably overlapped. According to Mentuhotep, the 9th dynasty was founded by a king named Actos, who began a royal line and ruled all of Egypt from Heracleopolis, farther south. Actos, he tells us, was the most cruel ruler Egypt had ever seen. He hurt people all over Egypt. 1. This king, who appears in inscriptions as Actoi, was actually the governor of the province centered at Heracleopolis. The tradition of his cruelty most likely stems from his armed attempt to seize all of Egypt. Almost as soon as Actoi was dead, Mentuhotep says that he went mad and was eaten by a crocodile, the instrument of divine vengeance. Another, pharaoh, announced himself much farther to the south. His name was Intif, and he claimed to rule all of Egypt from Thebes. Mentuhotep says that Actoi's 9th dynasty was followed by a 10th dynasty, and then neatly by an 11th dynasty. What actually happened was that the 9th and 10th dynasties and the 11th dynasty ruled simultaneously. Rule is a kind word. Unruly sets of warlords were fighting each other for the right to claim nominal control of Egypt, while other provincial governors went on doing as they pleased. An inscription from one of these governors, or nomarches, the territories ruled by the nomarches were known as nomes, shows a complete disregard for the royal pretensions in Heracleopolis and Thebes. I am overseer of priests, overseer of desert countries, overseer of mercenaries, great overlord of the gnomes, Antifi boasts. I am the beginning and the peak of mankind. I surpassed the feats of my ancestors. All of Upper Egypt was dying of hunger and people were eating their children, but I did not allow anybody to die of hunger in this nome. Never did I allow anybody in need to go from this nome to another one. I am the hero without equal, two in his own eyes at least. Antifi is the equal of any pharaoh. Mentuhotep's neat succession of dynasties is produced by his determination to stuff all of this chaos into the framework of the old dynastic successions. Even more than 1500 years after the fact, Mentuhotep cannot quite admit that the authority of Horus on earth has entirely disappeared. In this, he is far from alone. What inscriptions survive from the period show that Egyptian scribes either ignored the reality of their kingdom's breakdown, other ancient king lists pretend that the 9th and 10th dynasties never happened and pick up partway through the 11th, 3 or tried to put it in slightly less threatening terms. Egypt had not fallen into anarchy. No, the old north-south hostility had just made a temporary return. Clashes between the north and south were nothing new, and in the past a pharaoh had always risen to reunify the whole mess. So we find Intif I, the Theban pretender, calling himself king of Upper and Lower Egypt. In his own inscriptions point for this was more than a little grandiose, as he certainly was not king of Lower Egypt and probably didn't control all that much of Upper Egypt either. Nevertheless, it put him firmly into the tradition of Upper Egyptian pharaohs who had managed to bring the rebellious north back under control. Intif's soldiers fought, more than once, with troops from Heracleopolis, in a recreation of those old battles between north and south. Meanwhile, rival nomarches clashed, western Semites wandered into the delta, and Egypt's great past receded a little further. Troops fight troops, an account from the period reads, Egypt fights in the graveyard, destroying tombs in vengeful destruction. 5. Then, halfway through the 11th dynasty, Mentuhotep I came to the throne of Thebes. Mentuhotep, who was named after the Theban god of war, spent the first 20 years of his reign fighting his way north into Lower Egypt. Unlike Nama and Khashekemwy before him, he had to campaign not only against the soldiers of the northern king, but also against the nomarches in his way. One of his first great victories was against the governor of Abydos. The ferocity of the takeover is marked by at least one mass burial, a tomb containing 60 soldiers all killed in the same battle. 6. As he fought his way north, the soldiers of the 10th dynasty ruler at Heracleopolis retreated in front of him. Just before Mentuhotep reached Heracleopolis, the 10th dynasty king who reigned there died. The scramble for succession threw the defense of the city into disorder, and Mentuhotep marched into it with ease. Now he held both Thebes and Heracleopolis, but Egypt was far from united. The nomarches were not keen to give up their long-held powers. Battles with the provinces continued for years. Portraits of Egyptian royal officials during this time tend to show them carrying weapons, rather than papyri or other tools of office, suggesting that going to the office remained chancy for quite a long time. 7. But by the 39th year of his reign, Mentuhotep was finally able to alter the writing of his name. His new Horus name was, unsurprisingly, Uniter of the Two Lands. In fact, his 40-year struggle for power had almost nothing to do with north-south hostility, but the old paradigm of civil war gave him a much better chance to cast himself as a great pharaoh who had rescued Egypt once again. His spin was successful. Not long afterwards, his name begins to appear in inscriptions next to that of Nama himself. He is praised as a second Nama, equal to the legendary king who had first pulled Upper and Lower Egypt together into one. Mentuhotep's reign was the end of the first intermediate period and the beginning of Egypt's next period of strength, the Middle Kingdom. He ruled, according to Amenemhet, for 50 years. Although tomb inscriptions identify at least 5 different women as his wives, no inscriptions that date from his reign mention a son. 8 The next 2 kings had no blood link to him or to each other, and the third was a commoner, Amenemhet I, who had served Mentuhotep III as vizier. It seems that the idea of a divine royal bloodline, if honored in theory, had passed away in practice. Amenemhet I is the first king of dynasty 12. A southerner by birth, according to inscriptions, his mother was from Elephantine, far into Upper Egypt. Amenemhet immediately put himself into the line of great unifiers by building himself a brand new capital city, just as Narmer had, to celebrate his hold over the country. He called this new city, 20 miles south of Memphis, Caesar of the Two Lands, Itj. 9. It would serve him as his own balancing point between north and south. Memphis, still a center of worship of the Egyptian pantheon and home to Egypt's most sacred temples, was no longer the place where the pharaoh made his home. Amenemhet also commissioned scribes to write a prophecy about him, a document which began to circulate through Egypt very near the beginning of his reign. This prophecy of Nefertiti, supposedly from the reign of King Senusret 500 years before, begins with King Senusret brooding over the possibility that Egypt will fall to Asiatic invaders from the east, a clear case of a later worry imposed on a much earlier time, since this possibility probably never occurred to Senusret. Fortunately, Senusret's sage has a happy prediction: a king will come from the south. He will take the white crown, he will wear the red crown. Asiatics will fall to his sword, rebels to his wrath, traitors to his might. He will build the walls of the ruler to bar Asiatics from entering Egypt. 10. Amenemhet then proceeded to carry out the prophecy. With the help of his son Senusret, he led an expedition against the sand dwellers, who had infiltrated the delta. 11. He also built a fortress east of the delta to keep other invaders out and named it, not surprisingly, Walls of the Ruler. Near the end of his reign, Amenemhet was powerful enough to build himself a pyramid near his new city of Itj. It was only a small pyramid, but it stood as a monument to the return of the old order. Amenemhet must have felt himself to be walking in the footsteps of his great predecessors Narmer and Khufu and Khafre. The pharaoh's might was on the upswing once more. Then Amenemhet was murdered. Senusret wrote the story of his father's assassination shortly afterwards, in his father's own voice. I awoke to fighting, the dead Amenemhet says, and I found that it was an attack of the bodyguard. If I had quickly taken weapons in my hand, I would have made the wretches retreat. But there is none mighty in the night, none who can fight alone. My injury happened while I was without you, my son. 12. A few more details are contained in a story from slightly later, the Tale of Senusret. According to this account, Senusret was campaigning down south in the land of the Libyans, the desert west of the Nile, where desert dwellers had long troubled the Egyptian border. Hearing the news of his father's murder, Senusret left his army behind and flew like a hawk back north to Itj, a long and difficult journey. As the crown prince approached, the courtier Senusret fled from the palace up into the land of the Asiatics because he was certain that he would be suspected of involvement in the crime. Senusret fled from Egypt into Canaan, where after a harsh journey across the desert he discovered a rich land filled with wine, honey, and oil. Years later he returned and was pardoned by Pharaoh Senusret, who, after his father's murder, strengthened the kingdom, introduced co-regency with his son, and reshaped the image of the pharaoh from a divine being into a real man. His descendants, including the towering Senusret III, expanded Egypt's might by building massive fortresses in Nubia and through brutal campaigns against local tribes. These fortresses, some with towers, moats, and gates like medieval castles, showed Egypt's unmatched power. Yet they also revealed the fear of rebellion, as the Nubians deeply hated their conquerors. Right finger follow my channel The History Forge and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories.